Spurscast with your host, Paul Garcia.
And welcome back to another episode of the Spurscast. On today's episode, I will be speaking with Project Spurs writer Benjamin Bornstein. In this episode, Ben and I will discuss the Spurs landing the first overall pick to draft Victor Wembanyama and where the team will go from here. Let's go ahead and jump right into this episode with Ben. Ben, how you doing?
I am fantastic, sir. I slept incredibly poorly last night, and I loved every second of it.
Man, it was like nerve-wracking, just like when it became more of a reality, especially when I saw Houston fall. Where were they at Detroit first at 5. When Detroit got to 5, I was like, okay, the Spurs have a shot here. That's one of those teams down from in the top 3 or the bottom 3, should I say. Then Houston goes at 4, and I was like, I was doing the math in my head. It's either, the Spurs have a better chance, of course, more lottery balls than Portland and Charlotte. And sure enough, 3 goes to Portland, 2 goes to Charlotte, and then number 1 goes to the San Antonio Spurs. The Spurs end up they're going to be able to draft Victor Wembanyama. Just like your initial reaction from seeing that happen last night.
Oh, I was ecstatic. Evan and I were we were doing a Spaces last night, and it was beautiful. Man, there were a lot of excited people on that Spaces. I gotta say, it was so awesome. It was just, I was 5 when the Spurs won the '97 lottery, so I didn't really have a basketball consciousness yet. Mm-hmm. So it's funny because having grown up in Orlando, I saw Orlando get 2 number 1 picks before I saw the Spurs get their second. And it is wild. I had a buddy who's a huge Magic fan, and he was going crazy last year. He's like, it's going to be amazing. And I'm like, you can have Paolo.
Yes.
Next year's Victor Wembanyama, that's the guy everybody wants. But man, it was exciting. It was scary. It was terrifying. It was overwhelming. You name it. It was all of them, the emotions of the rainbow.
Yeah, man. No, just like you're saying, I'm getting just yesterday, my phone started blowing up, just texts from family members who live in San Antonio, excited. They think that, this is it. They're back to being a championship contender. I'm going to talk a little bit about, call me those, they're going to get there definitely with Wembanyama, but not necessarily like when Tim Duncan first came. We'll get into that in a little bit of detail. And then also just other fan bases of other teams, they were just basically saying congrats, like the Spurs are, really lucky and, et cetera. So just like a lot of people
were salty.
Yes, they were not too happy there. Especially, man, imagine being a Pistons fan. You watch that. They had the worst record in the league and they ended up going number 5. Yikes. So
since they changed the lottery system format, no team that has had the worst record has actually won the lottery.
Oh, wow. Yeah, you know what? You're right. Because I remember, that was something that was brought up before.
For what that's worth.
Yeah, so that's interesting. So again, so like I said, just a lot of people I haven't heard from in years were just contacting me, just talking about this. Like, this is a big deal right now in San Antonio. I know that there's videos going around of like the bars, people erupting, and just a lot of excitement of people were honking downtown. So yeah, it was just a really big night. And again, even though they didn't quite win a championship, it's like for their future is really
feels like
yeah, it feels like that. Basically, that's the feeling. Yes, that's coming out of San Antonio right now. Is that it just feels almost like they won the title.
It's definitely a top 10 Spurs moment.
Yeah,
no question.
So definitely, and it definitely changes their trajectory of where they're headed now, considering that they just had one of the roughest seasons in terms of winning just 22 games. All right, so I just want to go back to after everything happened, the Spurs had a virtual press conference with those of us in the media, and Brian Wright, the GM, spoke, and he basically said, it took 2 things for this to happen. One, they executed a plan, which of course for Spurs fans it was not a fun season. We saw 22 wins, a lot of injuries, and a lot of players getting rested. They didn't want to take any chances. They needed to make sure that they had a bottom 3 record for those 14% lottery odds, and it worked out for them. So that was part 1 of it. Part 2 was that really you just needed luck, like you said, Benny. We didn't know who was going to end up with the pick, but the Spurs put themselves in the best position along with Detroit and Houston, even though it didn't happen for them. And again, you just need luck on your side, and it happened for the Spurs. It happened in 1997 with Tim Duncan, and then now all of a sudden in 2023 it happens again with Victor Wembanyama, with them having that luck. And then lastly, after the Spurs got number one, well, then that means that they're going to end up getting the 33rd pick in the second round, and they're also still going to have the 44th pick via the Toronto Raptors also in the second round. So now this, like I was mentioning to you before recording, this isn't going to be one of my normal episodes, like where I go into stats and like financial stuff. We're going to be more open ended, just because it's just an early outlook of where the Spurs are headed now that they do have a player who's a generational talent in Victor Wembanyama. So the first question I have for you is, does their approach this offseason change? So I thought, they had two game plans. Plan A is if they get Wembanyama, there's a game plan there. And then plan B is like if they get picks 2 through 7, maybe more of a rebuild, that kind of thing. So my question to you is, do you think they're going to continue to slowly grow this roster, or do you think they're going to be aggressive in trying to build a contender very quickly, considering that Wembanyama said on TV yesterday that he wants to win a ring as soon as possible?
Sure. I mean, but also, if you're the number one pick in the draft, what are you supposed to say? Oh, I want to take my time and I don't want to get to a championship, right? So, I mean, he was saying all the right things, and he should, and that's great. And those are things you want to hear, absolutely. I would say the Spurs should not rush into signing any free agents this offseason, mostly because this free agency class sucks.
Yeah, it's rough, man.
Unless just a bunch of dudes opt out of their player options and a bunch of teams opt out of the team option, the pickings are slim this summer. So I would say go re-sign some guys, get them on some team-friendly deals, or do something that keeps your flexibility for the next season or the season after, where there's likely to be a lot more and better free agents. I mean, there's talk about Chris Paul stuff, but if you ask me, I wouldn't touch Chris Paul with a 10-foot pole because that man is just snake bitten. I don't know what to tell you. He was cursed with the Clippers. He can't stay healthy in the playoffs. He got to one finals with a superb Devin Booker and DeAndre Ayton, and they couldn't beat the Bucks. So I mean, if there's a team that maybe breaks that streak, maybe it's the Spurs, but you're also talking about Chris Paul is going to be how old? 37, 38? I don't know off the top of my head, but I mean, you're talking about an old point guard who's going to probably demand a lot of money and tie up your salary cap space. To me, it's not worth it. I mean, there's been talk about trade for Damian Lillard. I would say, great, do it if the price is right. If you're not giving up too much to Portland, now granted, if you're the Spurs, you have a ton of first round picks that aren't yours, and you're probably comfortable giving away a bunch of those now, knowing we have Wembanyama. Yeah. And as the Spurs, we're going to be winning games. So those picks probably aren't going to be very high picks anyway. It doesn't matter. Certainly a possibility. So that's, that I would not put that out of the realm of possibility. It wouldn't be my first option, but I would say take it easy with Wembanyama the first year. Let him get used to those other guys who are your young pieces who you want to keep around for a while, whether that's Devin Vassell, Sohan, Keldon Johnson. I know some people are split on Keldon Johnson right now. They think he should be a trade piece. You're going to keep Zach Collins because you're going to let Collins play 5 so that Wembanyama can be more comfortable at 4. To me, and you have some younger guys who are in the bigs stable who you can develop as well if you can find time for them somewhere. I just get the feeling Wembanyama is going to kind of play well with whoever you put on the court with him for the most part. He's a guy who can create for himself. He can create for others. Not an issue. I mean, when you're 7'5", you can do whatever you want. Right? That's kind of the reality. So, I mean, if I'm the Spurs, you have your number one pick. You're doing all of your scouting. You're doing all of your interviews for that 33rd and that 44th pick. And there's a ton of options out there for those guys too. And we can get into that at some point. But if you're the Spurs this offseason, don't go too hard in the free agency pool. Again, it's not a very good pool. Yeah. It's that you're not going to find guys out there who are going to drastically improve this team more than Wembanyama would by himself. Yeah. That's the other thing. I mean, the Spurs have set this kind of weird precedent, right? They went out and got David Robinson. When he served his 2 years and came back and played in I think his first season was 89-90 season, the team immediately improved. In his first season, they won 50-something games. Tim Duncan's first season, they won 50-something games. I don't know I think those rosters were already much better built.
Mhm.
And frankly, the year they got Tim Duncan, the reason they were so bad was David Robinson was injured all year. So that's why they didn't win a lot of games. So some bad luck, some planning, again, kind of like this year. But I don't know that this Spurs team has the same kind of pieces those earlier Spurs teams did to go and immediately have a 25, 30 game turnaround. That's a tall order. Especially in this NBA, that's, I would argue, has much more parity than it used to, and has a lot more superstars that are all teaming up together.
Mhm.
So I do not get your hopes up for a 50+ win season. It would be amazing. Don't get me wrong. I wouldn't not want that,
Yeah.
but I would not have it on my bingo card. I'll put it that way. If I could choose my bingo card, it would not be on there. I would be very pleasantly surprised, though.
Okay, so my answer to this question is also kind of what I said, but even before we knew they were going to get Wembanyama, was that, like I said, if they got Wembanyama in Plan A, I think they should look at this free agent class and is there a role player who had shooting that maybe they can lock up now, like on a 3 or 4 year deal? Again, not where that player is going to take the majority of your cap space for the next few years, but is that player out there right now? If that player's out there, then yeah, sure, to go ahead and sign him. That way he's gonna grow with this team. Maybe he's a veteran player already. But if not, don't rush and do things. Maybe you sign players on a 1 or 2 year deal. Again, you're not trying to use all that cap space because you may want to preserve it for making a trade or for, like you said, Ben, an all-star next year or the year after, when the free agent class definitely does get better. Now, the next question I wanted to ask you, because you're more plugged into the draft here, is for on one part for your first round selection, like trying to look at who are the Spurs going to draft. That's easy now. They're taking Wemby with the first round pick, so you don't have to worry about picks 2 through 7. But I want to ask you this: is there still a player projected in the first round that maybe the Spurs to try to trade up for, or trade, maybe put some picks together, those future picks like you mentioned, and get a player in the first round, or maybe even like, I'd hate to say it, but Keldon's that player who's kind of, can't maybe possibly traded. Not saying, I'm not going to report that he's being traded. I'm just saying he's that player kind of fits that he's on an extension. He's a young player. He's not quite established yet in the league. So I think Keldon would be like that trade piece for a team along with picks. Is there a player there in the first round that you think maybe they should still target, even though they're going to have Wembanyama now at number 1?
If they're going to target anybody, it's got to be a guard, I think. Even with Devin Vassell coming back, Keldon Johnson basically plays 3. Sometimes he plays an undersized 4. So if you're looking at a guy, you're looking at a guard that you can either pair with Trae Young or you can have come off the bench for Trae Young to spell him.
Jones, yeah. So.
A guy I've seen some people talk about in a potential Spurs trade is Cason Wallace, who I really like. I would love that because he is probably the best perimeter defender in this draft. He is a good spot up shooter from 3. He's not going to hurt you. He's still going to be able to help you space the floor a bit. He can drive it a little bit. He's a nice player. And I also happen to think that he kind of fell under that Kentucky spell where Calipari brings in guys and they don't play their whole game at Kentucky. Karl Anthony Towns is a great example.
Booker too.
Adebayo is a great example. Devin Booker was the 6th man.
Yes, I remember. I was like,
the year he got drafted. So, not guys aren't always able to showcase everything they can do when they play for Coach Calipari. So I would argue that Cason Wallace maybe even has more to show us.
Okay.
Granted, he has to do that at combine, he has to do that in workouts, whatever it may be. But I'm willing to bet there's more than meets the eye. He's a transformer. There, I said it. He's not Optimus Prime, but he's maybe he's a Bumblebee. But that's a guy I really like.
Okay.
It depends on which picks you're trading up, you're packaging together.
Yeah.
But I kind of low key really like Taylor Hendricks in the mid to late lottery. I think he's been going as high as 7 in some mock drafts now. A lot of the immediate lottery reaction drafts to the Pacers, which would be fine, good fit. I happen to think Taylor Hendricks is probably a good fit in most places. He's 6'9" forward who shoots it well. He's still not growing, but his game is still growing. And I think he's another guy who can showcase a lot more. But the Spurs, it feels like, in addition to needing a guard or two, it feels like they're missing kind of that extra big body or a guy next to Jeremy Sohan who maybe can do the things now that Jeremy Sohan is working on towards the future, most notably shooting. Taylor Hendricks, very solid shooter, can shoot from three, would space the floor for you, is probably, if he's not a plus defender, he's at the very worst, a middle of the road defender and won't hurt you. So I would say a guy like Taylor Hendricks might be worth packaging a couple picks and moving up for. I would say those two guys are probably the two I like the most. And that's really despite Taylor Hendricks playing at UCF, which didn't have a lot of great competition. I mean, they had a couple good schools in their conference. I mean, they played Houston twice and they played them well, but they didn't win those games. They went to the NIT. I know they beat Florida in the first round. I don't remember what they did after that, but it would have been nice seeing him in much better competitive arenas against much tougher opponents, just to really get a better idea of what he can do, especially because I don't think he's, if I remember correctly, I don't think he's playing in the scrimmages at the combine. There are a lot of lottery guys who are not doing that.
Oh, okay.
One, because they don't have to.
Until next
year. Two, they, a lot of the people in their ear are telling them, if you go and do this, the only thing you can do is make yourself look worse. And then guys who are, fringe first rounders or very clear second rounders, those are the guys who are playing.
Oh, okay. And then I had a thought on that. Let me see I already forgot what it was. Okay, anyway. Yeah, I mean, but I agree with you. That was, I was going to say, something you talked about last time you were on the Spurscast was to watch that second Orlando pick. They got the Bulls' pick at number 11. So that's also something to watch. So again, Orlando may not want to bring in two rookies, especially since they already have a young team. So that's also something to watch for in the event the Spurs want to maybe try to trade up to trade to 11 with some of those future picks. And then you kind of answered this question.
I would imagine, real quick, if Orlando is trading, I imagine they're going to take both of those and try and move up, though. I don't. That's not a bad idea for them to say who wants to come up and get 11, or maybe even who wants to come up and get 6, because 6 is their actual pick. And frankly, they might feel very petty and be like, let's throw it in Chicago's face. We're not even going to use our number 6 pick. We're only going to use their pick because someone's going to trade up for us and give us future picks, whatever it is.
Okay, so yeah, that's definitely.
I personally want that. I think it'd be hilarious, but.
And you kind of answered this question, but you still think, right, that they should, use those number 32 and number 44, try to find some players in the second round. I want to note that because we know that they do have 11 players, including Wemby, coming back onto the team. So again, that's 4 open roster spots, and then they do have those 3 two-way slots open that they could try to put those second round players on those contracts if they needed to. Yes,
I think they should. Take those two guys, especially now that they have the extra two-way slot, which is huge. I think I love that. A couple of mocks I've seen, Trace Jackson Davis at 33. I would not hate that at all. You really have to find a niche for him. He's a 6'9" big man. He protects the rim very well, but he doesn't shoot it outside of the paint. I think he was starting to show a little bit at the combine that he can shoot it a bit. He never really did it at Indiana in his 3 years. They played him back to the basket, but he was abusing whatever defender was on him in the post. I mean, he got to every spot he wanted to get to. You weren't stopping him. You knew exactly what he was going to do, and there wasn't diddly you could do about it. And he was still scoring on guys, averaging however much he was averaging over the course of the season. I think he averaged a double-double. So, I mean, playing in the Big Ten, no less, which is a big man's league. So, he's a very good player at 33. I would love that. And, I mean, if he falls to 44, I'd obviously say that's a huge steal. A guy maybe who falls to 44, if you're looking for guards, maybe an Amari Bailey, maybe a Terrence Shannon Jr. There's at that point, there's a lot of options. I mean, there's just so many people. There's so many players, I should say. It's not just people. There's a ton of players who went to the draft this year that maybe shouldn't have. I want to say there were more people who declared for the NBA draft this year than last year and the year before.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Not combined, but more than both of those years. And I think part of that is some of these guys get bad info.
Mhm.
I think some guys maybe get a promise, but that promise isn't fulfilled.
Mhm.
And I think some of it is a lot of guys are just coming out because they want to go to the combine and see what's up, and they figure worst comes to worst, I'll go play overseas.
Okay. So,
Which, like, if I'm getting invited to the NBA draft combine, I'm not there to play to go overseas. Like you can live a nice cushy life playing overseas, but I want to make the league, right?
yeah.
That's the dream. That's the best league in all of the world. Why would I not play in the NBA? So there were definitely some guys who raised their draft stock, I would say, just today in the first scrimmages we had. But like a Brandon Podziemski, I think that's a guy who's going to end up getting some first round hype. He played really well today. Dylan Mitchell, Texas, University of Texas, a guy, he was super hyped coming out of high school. Didn't quite live up to that hype. And part of it was he never showed that he had a jumper. And now he's at the combine, he's hitting everything.
Oh, wow.
Like, is this a fluke? Is this the real Dylan Mitchell? Not everybody is convinced. So I think if he can convince people in workouts, yeah, the jumper's real. I just never shot it at Texas, or I never felt comfortable at Texas, whatever it is. I think that jumps him up too. And maybe he's a 33 or a 44 guy. And frankly, if it's Dylan Mitchell, it's a guy who's in your own backyard,
Mm-hmm.
easy sell for a fan base right there as well.
For sure. Right there with Texas, right? So all right. So now the last thing I do want to talk about is just kind of, again, you kind of mentioned this earlier, and it's more so kind of just to let Spurs fans know, because I know I've been getting friends and family members have been texting me. They basically think it's like just like that year right after they got Tim Duncan, where like they're immediately contenders again. Top team, and it's not quite like that. 1990. So I want to go through 1997 versus 2023, just the different approaches, or just kind of the roster that was already intact. So the year after they got Timmy, year one of Timmy's first year, they end up winning 56 games. So again, they were a very successful team. We do want to note, though, like you mentioned, Ben, before David Robinson got hurt, the year before that, on 1996, they were a 59-win team. So again, this was a team with multiple, Sean Elliott was on the team, David Robinson, a former All-Star, or even David was probably a current All-Star at that time. And actually, Elliott made the All-Star team in 96.
And David Robinson was an MVP.
Yeah, exactly. So again, these are totally different rosters. And then even when Timmy came onto the team, there was multiple 30-plus-year-olds, veteran players on this team who had been established, won games before. And now this current team, I was just looking at the roster, the ages of the players. Most of these players are below, under the age of 23. Like the majority of these guys who get the real minutes, Vassell, Sohan, all those kind of guys.
They don't quite know how to win yet.
Exactly. These are young, established, not established players. None of these players are all-stars quite yet. So Victor is joining a team with a bunch of young players. Now, a lot of young players with upside, but again, not quite. They haven't shown that they're a winning ball club just yet. And so I would say that if the Spurs, I would say there's two paths for the Spurs in terms of this first coming season with Wembanyama. I think path number one is like, okay, let's say they're very aggressive. They go out and try to trade for an established star, for a player like Damian Lillard or someone like that. Then I think, yes, they can definitely get back into the playoff picture. Now, if they just kind of just build a team with young players around Wembanyama, I think we could end up seeing something similar to what we saw in the first year with LeBron. When LeBron came in 2003, remember, he didn't make the playoffs either, but he turned around the Cavs in just 1 year, where they ended up winning 35 games that year and got the 9th seed out east. And so they barely missed the playoffs. And that's kind of where I see if the Spurs aren't very aggressive to put a bunch of veterans around this team, I think that with Wemby, they could end up having a pretty good year where they're maybe a play-in team or kind of right below that. What do you think about those two approaches?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's unless that Damian Lillard deal, it just pops for you and you think it's the perfect fit and you think you're getting good value there. I mean, if you think all of those things, great, pull the trigger. If they do that, I'd say you got to at least make a play in the first year.
Mm-hmm.
If they're not going to do that, I'd say threaten to do it, get close, you get within a couple games, maybe you miss it in the last couple weeks of the season, but you've shown clear progress.
Exactly.
You won 32 games. You win 10 more games.
Mm-hmm.
That gives you major optimism for the next year. I mean, I haven't even looked at the 24 draft yet. So, I mean, you may have guys who are going to be late in the lottery who you like, and that's fine. And you can go from there. But they'll surely have some options wherever they draft that year. I don't imagine they're going to win only 22 games again.
Oh yeah, no,
even with how the roster is currently constructed, and even independent of how the offseason may go.
Exactly. All right. So our last topic here is I just want to kind of go through some early cap space options because I've seen some of these cap space numbers float around on social media. And so I do want to note, because I keep seeing a lot of places that the Spurs are going to have $40 million in cap space. That is true. They can get up to $40 million in cap space, but that does require them letting all the free agents walk and actually waiving Zach Collins, who's on a non-guaranteed contract at $7.7 million up until June 28th. So what we heard Pop say before the season ended, but before they got Wemby, was that he had basically said Zach's our starting center next year. So Pop basically said that Zach's coming back. So when you put Zach definitely on this team that his contract guarantees, they're going to have $36.7 million in cap space. Now, because the Spurs really don't have a point guard right now, with Trey Jones being a restricted free agent, let's just say they lock in, they re-sign Trey Jones at $8 million, or maybe get him on an extension before June 30th. Plus, they're bringing back Collins. Well, then they have about $29.8 million in cap space. So basically, somewhere in that neighborhood of like 30 to like 40 million is kind of the different paths that they can take with their cap space. But like you and I said, Ben, we don't think they're going to go out and just like aggressively try to sign free agents just to use that cap space. They may be holding it to like try to trade for some players and kind of just like
I think it goes into effect this year, right? There's a higher spending floor.
Yes. So with the spending floor, it's not fully intact yet, but there is a penalty. If you don't reach the minimum, you only get 50% of the tax distribution. Yes. So they have to. They're going to spend this money. I think they have to. You don't want to get just 50%. And then the following year, that completely comes into play where you're penalized. You don't get any of the tax of the tax distribution money. So yeah, you're right.
San Antonio wants that money.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, even if it takes just signing a role player like 1 or 2 year deal, they're going to have to do something just to keep the team competitive, but then also get to that salary floor or try to trade for players, like I said, during the year. And just kind of like what you said, Ben, this is not a great free agent class. 2 players on player options who are like more scoring kind of players can kind of create their own offense, or like Fred VanVleet, Chris Middleton. I don't think those players would have to opt out of their deals. And then also like just like an unrestricted free agents, like for a point guard, D'Angelo Russell with the Lakers. Like these aren't players who are going to dramatically change your season. And then the one marquee big name player who was an all-star this year is Dame Lillard, who's like they don't know, Portland doesn't know exactly what's going to happen with him. I mean, obviously he's under contract, but they can end up trying to trade him. And then there's just like those wild card players who are maybe a previous established all-stars like Zach LaVine or Trae Young with Atlanta. There's also like players who have a lot of potential, but they really had a bad playoff performance. So somebody like Jordan Poole. So there's just a lot of wild card players out there. Again, the Spurs have a lot of options they can go to with their offseason approach. So I am eager to see what they do now that they know they're definitely going to have Victor Wembanyama. Did you have any comments there?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, how ironic would it be if the Spurs somehow landed Trae Young after the Spurs trade away DeJounte Murray to Atlanta because Atlanta thought they needed to pair Trae Young with him? I mean, that would be a wild story and absolutely hilarious on a variety of levels. But yeah, I mean, it's if you're the Spurs, find some role-playing guys. I think I have a bad feeling that like they're going to end up having to overpay some guys just because they have to meet that floor.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that floor and forcing teams to pay certain guys, whoever they're going to pay, I think it's going to force a lot of teams into overpaying and setting a bad market for some players.
Mm.
And they could regret that if they give out very long-term deals, really 3 years or more. So I think that will be something to watch for this offseason. It could get really weird.
Man, this is kind of off topic, but I was crunching the Rockets numbers, and man, they have like 50 to like almost like 47 to 57 million they have to basically get to this coming offseason. Wild. Yeah. There's a situation where they can have that much cap space. Like
that is what you get for being irresponsible.
and then when they get the 4th pick so that's rough if you're a Rockets fan. No wonder they weren't too happy on that.
They had bad juju all season, and that's what you get. I will die on that hill. You ran your organization completely unprofessionally, and on top of that, you went out and hired Ime Udoka as your head coach, and you put that same head coach who has known issues, you put him as your representative at the lottery. There was no way the Rockets were getting the first pick. I'm sorry. Whether you believe in narratives, whether you believe in conspiracy theories, whatever it is, there were a number of reasons why the Rockets were not getting that pick. I'm sorry. That's just the reality.
Yeah, so they're in a rough situation, especially with that, like I said, that minimum floor that they have to hit this coming season, like the Spurs do and other teams that are going to have cap space. So, again, those are just our initial reaction, Spurscast listeners, to the Spurs getting Victor Wembanyama. Again, they've now done in just year one of tanking. They did the most difficult part. They ended up getting the number one pick, the generational talent, the player who's going to be setting their foundation for years to come now. And so, yeah, I mean, it's just a really good time right now in San Antonio. The organization's definitely headed in a very bright direction now that they're going to have Wemby joining the team. So I do want to say thank you to Ben for joining me here on this episode of the Spurscast. And also thank you all for listening. And also I want to say a shout out to Joe Garcia for mixing and producing this episode. From all of us at Project Spurs, stay safe and have a great day.